Good morning, everyone, and a big warm welcome to our virtual roadshow event for England, where we'll be hearing about the work of the UK Cybersecurity Council in career pathways and standards, and about the work of UK C3. Just to run through the event today, we'll be starting off with an introduction to the work of the UK Cybersecurity Council from Simon Hepburn, CEO of the Council. Following this, we'll have an update about the work of UKC3 from Chiara Mitchell, UKC3 Director and Ecosystem Development Lead, followed by a presentation around the work that the Council is undertaking in career pathways from Amy Rogers, Programme Manager at the UK Cybersecurity Council, and Zeshan Sattar, Director, Learning and Skills Certification at CompTIA. We'll then have a short Q&A session on everything that we've heard so far, followed by a presentation on the work of cyber standards that's been undertaken at the Council from Paul Dawson-Hart, Programme Manager, and Brian Lilly, Technical Lead, both at the UK Cybersecurity Council. And that will be followed by a Q&A on that. And we hope to finish around about 12:30 today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Simon Hepburn, CEO of the UK Cybersecurity Council. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you very much. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and great to see you all. Great to have so many people online. I mean, what I'll be doing this morning is just a really brief presentation around the history and background to the organisation and what we're doing in relation to our agenda moving forward. So it's a brief presentation. So as part of our history, back in 2016 to 2021, there was obviously the key cyber security strategy that was developed. And within that document, there were specific references around the importance of how we need to develop and accredit the cybersecurity profession. But also how, for all the organisations involved, we really needed a focal point which could advise, shape and inform national policy. And both at that time and now, as I'm sure a lot of you will realise, there's an awful lot that's going on in relation to the kind of policy agenda around cyber security, around information security and around tech. So it's really important, I think, at that point that we basically, that there was a focal point of an organisation to kind of lead that agenda moving forward. So back in 2019, the council formation project was established, and that was all these organisations you can see on this slide. And I think the focus of those organisations was really to set the foundations, and that's why it's a formation project, really set the foundations for the council. So there were 10 core work streams, so that included standards, ethics, governance, careers, etc. And basically with over 100 people involved from representatives from these organisations who then developed some of the core foundation work for which is now obviously the foundation work for us as the council itself. So again, I'm sure there's several colleagues, more than several colleagues that are on this call, and to thank you for your contribution and your input, because without that we wouldn't be where we are today. So massive thank you and appreciation. I think what came out of that work, and obviously working with marketeers, etc. as well, I think the key kind of phases and phrases was around, for us to really be effective, it's important that we represent the sector. So I think the one thing that came out was the importance of being the voice for the profession. And a lot of people know that my view on that is, to be the voice of the profession, you also have to listen, but also you need to hear. So there's always a lot of conversations taking place, and we see how can we be the conduit for that kind of knowledge back to government. And then to really be the self-regulatory body for the wider profession, the importance of supporting the government cybersecurity strategy. And ultimately, that is around being, the safest place to live and work online. To develop nationally recognised standards and career route maps, and that was a lot of the work of the formation project and the council as we're driving the agenda forward. And really importantly, I think, to be the umbrella organisation for existing professional organisations to really drive forward the key challenges within the sector. So that's our kind of core aim and core mission and the core work that we're doing as an organisation. Some of the work that came out, and again, the great work that the formation team and the organisations involved, was around really looking at, because there were so many different roles, responsibilities, duties, specialisms, it's really about looking at, okay, so what's the key areas that we really need to focus on? What are the key areas and components within the sector? Because, if we're comparing our sector to engineering or law or accountancy, they've been going for hundreds of years. It's very clear around the specialisms are really clear around the kind of how you develop and the routes in. So it's really clear for young people or career changers. So what we wanted to do is really drill down on what are the key specialisms. There are different views. We've got 16, and there's a lot of work to really drill down on what they are. There are views that there's only 10. There's other views that there's actually 20. And other views that there's a combination of each. So some of the work that we'll be doing will really be to drill down what are the key specialisms, what's the details that are required. And again, I think Amy and Zeshan will be sharing some of that information and how that basically develops the profession. So continuing on our kind of journey, so the formation project ended at the end of March last year, and that's when the organisation became its own independent entity, and that was both a limited company with 4 kind of founding directors, led by Dr. Claudia Nathanson. Then in July 21, we became a registered charity, obviously we've engaged with the Charity Commission. In September 21, I was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer for the organisation. And also in September 21, we established our organisational membership scheme. And that's really for organisations who want to engage with us and be part of the development of the sector and of our standards, ethics, as part of our kind of working groups, etc. Then in November 21, we were given a World Charter by the Queen. That was through the process through the Privy Council. And also in November, there was the Decrypting Diversity Report that was launched by NCSC, which was the second year after the first year, basically baseline, and that was written by KPMG. So within that report, I think there's 6 core recommendations, 2 of which the council will be driving forward, which we're really pleased to obviously be included in that. And in December, as I'm sure you all know, the National Cyber Strategy was basically launched, and with some really key messages around the direction of travel for cyber security. So one of the things I think that in relation to the kind of chartership status, so obviously we've achieved chartership status, as I said, back in November. Within our kind of bylaws in that document, we've got 3 kind of core levels, and again, I'm sure Paul and Brian would be talking to this. So the 3 core levels are charter, principal, and associate. And I think for us, it was really important we didn't just have the chartership level. It was important we had the other 2 levels, but also that I'm really keen on the whole kind of progress around what are the building blocks to achievement of. It hasn't just got to be chartership, but working into the organisation, again, kind of linked to the career kind of route map. So whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's, how do we engage obviously GCSE, BTECs and A levels, technical levels, and the different certificates and qualification, where do they sit within this and what's the routes in? So that there's a wider piece of work that's taken place to really ensure there's that appropriate alignment. And I'm sure, again, Amy and the team will be able to talk to that in more detail. But my chair, Dr. Claudia Nathanson, constantly refers to the importance that we stay within our swim lane. So within the strategy, we're really focused on pillar 1, which is a UK cyber ecosystem, and objective 2. So enhance and expand the nation's cyber skills at every level, including through a world-class and diverse cybersecurity profession that inspires and equips future talent. And for me, that absolutely encapsulates the core work of the organisation in one very nice paragraph, and that's really our key driver as we move the agenda forward. Our key kind of 5, there's an awful lot of pillars usually. So our key 5 pillars is one, obviously around professional standards, and again, Paul will be talking to this in a moment, Paul and Brian. Professional ethics, and really this is about code of conduct. This is about building trust both within the sector, but also with the general public. It's very similar to accountancy, very similar to engineering, etc., very similar to law. It's really important that we're really clear what are the ethical behaviours that we expect within the sector. We've got careers and learning. So again, Amy and Zeshan will be talking to this, and our work stream is taking place there. Then outreach and diversity. So really it's about engaging with schools, colleges, career changes, and really increasing the diversity within the sector. And that's again why we're really pleased to be part of that Decrypting Diversity Report and recommendations. And also the thought leadership. So again, I think the focus here is around the thought leadership on our swim lane, so on the skills agenda, on the gap, on ensuring that the more people come into the sector, on promoting this as a fantastic career and profession to join, and those kind of areas. So the technical side, we work and engage very much with NCSC, but in relation to this thought leadership piece around the skills, then it's about that kind of wider engagement and people getting involved in that. And also influencing, really importantly, as I said, there's a lot taking place in the policy agenda and landscape at the moment. So really involved in the sense of ensuring that we're talking truth to power and we're influencing some of the kind of conversations taking place within government. That really links nicely onto what I call our ecosystem partners. And as you can see, we're working across different government departments, and you can see we're in the centre there, and it's really because there's a lot of ongoing conversations with all of these departments. We're really focused, as I said, on our swim lane and the issues around standards, ethics, careers, and the kind of skills agenda. We work very closely with NCSC, obviously as the technical authority, and I think that's really important from my perspective in the sense of making sure that what we're developing, when we're working in close engagement, but two, it works for MOD, it works for DWP, yeah, it works across the different government departments. And as you can see, we are the UK Cyber Security Council, so we do engage with, and we've had roadshows with all of the devolved nations, so Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, and we're really pleased with that. And obviously, you've got key technical partners, Cyboc, Tech UK, and UKC3, some of our key strategic partners, and that's really important to us and for us because I think it is really around that wider engagement and collaboration of how we basically develop the sector together. Which again leads really nicely into my next slide, which is really around we can only achieve the kind of our key objectives, our key KPIs, what we all want for UK PLC through collaboration, by working together, by having conversations, and sometimes discourse. And there is going to be disagreement, and not everyone's going to be on the same page. But really, there is an important mission here, yes, for the council, but really for all of us. And it's really through that collaboration and real kind of leadership that we'll be able to drive the agenda forward, and really be both leaders within the UK, but also leaders on an international basis. And I think that is really important. And that kind of updates and some of our plans. Obviously, we've been doing the road shows, both the DCMS road shows and our standards careers road shows, which is one today. We've established our standards, ethics, and careers working groups within the organisation. So that's again using organisational members to really review and drive that agenda forward. We've got a series of events we're planning for organisational members from April onwards. So keep an eye on our website for that. We'll be developing our strategic plan, which is ultimately aligned to the national cyber strategy. And that's work that's currently in progress and going well, to be quite honest. We're engaging with the wider sector around our strategic developments. So, and that's really about where somebody's working with a mission that's aligned to ourselves. How can we then form those strategic alliances to really drive the agenda forward? And examples of that also is around where there's really good work taking place, sometimes in pockets all over the country, Newcastle, Bradford, Leeds, Birmingham, etc. But they're not getting the amplification. So sometimes we will form those kind of collaborations to really amplify work that we see as works within our kind of our mission and our kind of our key pillars, but also driving the agenda forward. Very importantly to us again is also the importance of working through the chartered organizational requirements. So restructuring our organization to deliver on that in a sense. So obviously there's usually changes in your organization incorporation from limited company to a royal incorporated company. So just working through those changes. And final but not the least point is the importance of developing an organization that is fit for purpose to deliver on our mission. So we're actually going through a recruitment process at the moment. I think all the posts are closed now. We've got a series of interviews taking place over the next 3 weeks for several roles that we advertised. And again, that's about people joining the organization to absolutely drive the organization forward. And also, we're also doing reviews of our own systems and processes. So you will see ongoing improvements to the website, to CRM, etc., etc. So there's a lot taking place behind the scenes, really we are ultimately a new organization and startup. And just to share that I'm sure most of you will know, there is the consultation on embedding standards and pathways across the cyber profession by 2025. That is currently open. I think it's really important that people kind of share your views, share your opinions, share your comments within that document. And the closing date is 11:45 this Sunday, so Sunday the 20th of March. So just to kind of finalize, just to say thank you very much. It's really good to have you all here. I'm sure you'll enjoy today's session and really look forward to the Q&A that's coming. Thank you very much. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Please do put your questions in the chat area for Simon, and we'll put them to him during our Q&A session. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Chiara Mitchell, UKC3 Director and Ecosystem Development Lead, who's going to give a short update about the work of UKC3. Welcome, Chiara.
Great, thanks, Lisa, and lovely to be back with the UK cybersecurity workshops as well. Last time I was involved in the one aimed at the Scottish community, talking about my other role, which is the cluster manager for Scotland's cybersecurity cluster. But as Lisa said, today I'm here in my wearing my UKC3 hat as UKC3 Director and Ecosystem Development Lead. So today I'm going to talk you through, well, what is UKC3? We're quite a new organisation, so conscious that many of you may not have even heard of us. So what are we here to do? and in particular, how can we support the UK Cybersecurity Council and all the work that they're going to be endeavouring over the next few years. So starting with this slide, sorry, let me make that a little bit bigger so I can see it myself. I just wanted to touch on a quote from the National Cyber Strategy, because I think it nicely positions where UKC3 sits, and it's all about helping to integrate and connect the cyber community across the UK. And that's exactly what I'll explain in terms of what our role is, both for UKC3, but also all the cyber clusters that we support through the work that we do. So just to start with a little bit of background, in terms of, well, what even is a cluster? Because I realise, in some areas, it's starting to become a bit more of a normal term, and others, it can be, it can still be quite a new concept. And clusters really are a proactive route to supporting the community. It's about having an organisation, having a group that will make sure you're bringing the community together so that we're able to collaboratively work together to grow the sector. And it's all about driving that growth in the sector. And the growth can come through different ways. So one of our pillars, I know Simon talked about pillars, one of our pillars is about driving innovation and growth. So we're looking at to try and grow the sector through more companies, helping those companies that exist to scale up, maybe to trade internationally, supporting spin-outs from academia, inward investment. So, we have a good presence around the UK from, all the key cybersecurity players, but also that they're growing their teams here in the UK and having a strong presence. So they're accessing the talent that they can across the UK. And also there's also go through skills. So one of our other pillars is skills. And of course, we will work very, very closely with the UK Cybersecurity Council on anything we do in skills. Well, it's really trying to promote cybersecurity as a career path, and that's accessing both, working with school kids and trying to encourage people to take it up as something to study in university, but trying to make sure it's a accessible career path for people at any stage of the career, so that we see it as being a very accessible, inclusive and diverse sector, because ultimately that's in all our interests to make sure that we do so. And then our last kind of pillar that we talk about is ecosystem development. So one of the roles we play is trying to connect the ecosystem across the UK and bring it together. We all do that. All the cluster managers will do that respectively within the areas that we cover, but we'll also do it through UKC3 to try and help connect and pull that together. And I'll come back and speak to that more, but that's really where the clusters kind of come into their own in terms of having that presence across the UK, so we can help disseminate and engage some of the UK programs that are being initiated now. So who are the clusters? So there are more clusters than this, but the ones we're highlighting here are the ones that have been through the UKC3 recognition process. So we have quite a lightweight process, but it's really just to check on the governance, the framework, how these clusters been run. And as soon as once they're recognised, they then can access some of the funds that UKC3 are managing. And I'll come back and explain a little bit more about that shortly. But I just wanted to give you a feel for who they are. If you're not already connected with your local cybersecurity cluster, obviously get in touch, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to make sure we can connect you with your local cluster. On the back of the work we've been doing, even in this first year of us, we're seeing, a number of these clusters kind of, I guess, be reinvigorated. Some of them may have just been, gone a little bit quiet with COVID or for, other reasons. And so it's great to see the Northwest Cybersecurity Cluster, for example, a great example of that's now back, reinvigorated. They're, they're running their first events, and there's lots happening up there. And of course, Manchester plays a key role in that as well. Similar, Cyber East, that was actually amalgamation of Suffolk, Norfolk and County Cambridge clusters, had gone a little bit quiet, and now they're back with a whole new brand, website, and had their first event just this week. So it's really been great to see what impact UKC3 has had already in the short time we've existed. We don't have a full map of clusters yet, but we are working on that. We're in conversations with some organisations in the southeast of England, in East Midlands, and elsewhere. So we're hoping we'll soon have a full map of clusters right across the UK. But as I say, if you're not already in touch with your local cluster, do reach out to UKC3, and we can certainly put you in touch. So what is UKC3? Why are we here? So I guess setting the scene a little bit. So some of the cyber clusters have been around since 2014. As I say, some have, in that time went a bit quiet. Maybe, other priorities kind of crept in because a lot of people were doing these on top of their jobs as volunteers. Others have gone, have really grown. So Cynam, the cluster that represents Cheltenham and the region around Cheltenham, I'm sure many of you will have heard of Cyan, may have been to one of their events. They've obviously really grown and are well established, but that hasn't been the case throughout the UK and all the clusters. So DCMS, who've always been supporters of and the clusters and work with us, kind of recognise the fact that some of the clusters were still trying to do this purely on a volunteer basis, people on top of their day job. So UKC3 was set up for a couple of reasons. One is to try and pull together the cyber clusters. So we've got a much stronger voice and power and authority, I guess, by having a UK organisation that represents and speaks on behalf of each of the cyber clusters. We're also a way we can interface. So, for UK's Cybersecurity Council example, there'll be many times where actually it's a lot easier for them to kind of connect with UKC3 as a whole. There may be times, obviously, they'll want to reach out to individual clusters if they're doing something very focused around a particular area and location. But often it's easier if national organisations like the Security Council want to come and access UKC3, and then we can push out things to all the clusters rather than having to have that direct relationship with each of the clusters in turn. But also through DCMS, having recognised the fact that some of them are still volunteer run, UKC3 now manages some funding, which we allocate out to the clusters. And again, they need to go through the recognition process and then apply for funding, which is adjudicated and assessed. And if successful, we then allocate that funding. So it's not massive amounts, but it's certainly enough for clusters to be able to have, whether it's a business developer part-time or marketing part-time, some resource to help them try and sustain the work of the cluster. So it's not relying on individuals who then may become busy, and therefore the cluster kind of is pushed to the side. So it's trying to make sure we have that full map of clusters that are active, engaged, and sustainable throughout the UK. And there's other things we'll do to support those clusters on that journey to kind of establishing and growing and becoming more sustainable as well. So I will come and speak to you about that. One of the areas where the clusters actually have been kind of, I guess, recognised as well, and the work of the UKC3 is helping that, is you'll all have heard of the levelling up agenda and the fact that there's a real intent to try and push initiatives, out beyond London and even Cheltenham, where there's a feeling a lot of the heart of the cyber ecosystem was kind of set there. And that's where clusters can really come into their own. If I take Scotland, for example, which is the cluster I run, I know the community in there. I know who's got a presence there. I know who, our startups or scale-ups are, if the program is particularly aimed at those. We're connected in with the whole education element and side of things in Scotland as well. So for programs that are which are UK programs, but you're really trying to push out that reach and get that engagement at a local level, that's where the clusters can really come into their own. And great example of that was the Cyber Runway program, which was an online program, DCMS backed, to support startups and scale-ups. They had 4 in-person events. One was Scotland, I think it was Wales, Northern Ireland and Yorkshire. I think some went online just because of COVID in the end, but ours was in person in Scotland, and that was delivered through the cluster because we knew the community, we knew who the startups and SMEs that would benefit from it was. And in fact, we arranged a lot of the local speakers, but it was great. Then we had Cyber Runway, we had DIT, we'd people from across the UK kind of fly in to support that event as well. So it's a great example of how a UK program needs that local access, that local community as well across the UK, and that's exactly where clusters can come in and play. I haven't tracked my time by at all, Lisa. So if I'm running over, do shout. But I am getting there. Just a quick look at who we are. So this year was our pilot year. It was things you'd expect with any new organization: branding, websites, processes, governance. And all of the above. To get UKC3 up and running. So when we look at the board members, we're also the organisation. There is no other resource at the moment, apart from we use a marketing agency to help us with all that kind of comms and marketing side. Going forward, we are looking to have resource to actually support this, and we have someone starting in May who'll be full time focused on supporting a lot of those kind of processes and the more administration function, but also doing some business development and work as well. So we're very excited about that because that will make a big difference than the 6 of us trying to do everything and be everything for UKC3. We were in place initially for a year, as part of the pilot. But that's now being extended for another 6 months because we just saw, as we're the ones writing the business case and the strategy and putting a plan in place for next year and beyond, it was too much of a churn to suddenly put a whole new board in place. But certainly come September, and we would expect to have a new board in place, and that would also include some people from outside the clusters. So we're making sure we have that diversity and of thought, as you'd expect, for any board. So we're really kind of, I guess, the board that's here just to get UKC3 up and running, get it established, and then it will look to open it up to new applications. It's to have that new board in place for September. So some of our main roles, as I say, is a whole adjudication of cluster recognition, and then adjudication of funding applications, and then allocation of funds. So that's really where we've been spending a lot of our time this year. But we do have a couple of working groups, so I'm just going to very quickly touch on them. So we've got three main ones, and this ties back to the pillars I mentioned. We've got cyber skills, ecosystem development, and innovation and growth. And I have one slide on each, so I'm just going to very quickly fly through these. Ecosystem development is the one I lead, and the main areas we've been involved this year is helping the new clusters. So it's been great, as I say, to see some new clusters reforming and being set up, and we're in conversations with a number more. So we are expecting to get that full map in the next few months, hopefully. And then also it's about trying to support the clusters, trying to understand what they need from us to help them on that journey. So we've got an in-person event happening end of March, which is going to be great to just share learning and best practice, and also ideas about future projects and case studies from projects that's happened this year with UKC3 funding. But also as part of that, we're inviting some people from Tech UK, DCMS will be there, and we're going to have Brian from the Security Council coming along as well. So it's about kind of bringing the ecosystem together as well, and making sure we've got those right connections in with all of the clusters, and not just with UKC3 for when it's it's useful in future purposes. And then secondly, we've actually organised some cluster management training, because cluster is still a new word, it's still a new concept for some areas. And if you look at what happens in Europe, some of them are really well-funded, well-run organisations that run clusters. I'm talking about 30 full-time people running a tech cluster. Might not just be cyber specific, but running clusters. So we're wanting to make sure people are thinking longer term. How can my cluster evolve? What can it do? What else can we be involved in that will benefit the community? So we're organising some training just so people can start to move beyond, I guess, these volunteer-led kind of meetups, and actually see, well, what can a cluster become? And if you look at Signem and what they've done, I mean, in Scotland, I'm very lucky. I'm a full-time cluster manager. There aren't many of them around the UK, but that's what we kind of want to move towards over time. That there are teams who are, that's what you do. We run the cluster, rather than it being on top of people's day jobs. So we're helping them on that journey to see how and where these clusters can evolve. And then very quickly, because I must be out of time at this stage, innovation grow. Really, a lot of that is really, as I say, is making sure we're pushing out information to across the UK for any of the UK DCMS-led innovation initiatives, and we're helping to promote the startups, the scale-ups, the ones that are growing these high growth potential products and services. So it's even if you're sitting in Scotland or you're sitting in Northern Ireland, you're not missing out from that visibility and that promotion that some of the companies maybe sitting in London or Cheltenham can access more easily. So really trying to help that whole levelling up agenda. And then lastly, on the skills side, the main project that we're working on at the moment is a mapping of CyBOC, just to map that to actual roles. So if you were a network engineer, for example, focus on securing networks. What roles, what areas would I need to know about to be able to say, to be able to access and move into that career path. But there's other projects that we're in conversations about, and obviously we're keeping very close to UK Cybersecurity Council on anything we do on the skills side. And that's it for me, really. Just to say, I mean, we're moving into year 2. We're expecting a lot, more projects, more cross-cluster projects as well. So and hopefully some events that will bring in the wider ecosystem as well. So so watch this space, but looking forward to see how we evolve as we move into year 2. And that's me.
Thank you very much indeed, Cara, for being here today and giving us an update on the work of UKC3. If you have any questions for Chiara, please do put them through in the chat function, and we'll put them across to her in our first Q&A session shortly. I'm now delighted to introduce Paul Dawson-Hart and Brian Lilly, who's going to be talking about, going to be introducing Amy Rogers and Zeshan Sattar, who's going to be talking about cyber pathways and giving a short presentation on the work that's been done to date. Welcome both.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Rogers, and I was the project workstream leader for the Qualification and Careers Division of the Council's Formation Group, under the lead of Zishan, who'll speak to you and introduce himself in a minute. Prior to that, my background has been in vocational qualification and program development for BPP and Pearson, and I've done career development for London Business School and Imperial College Business School. Now I'll hand over to Zishan. He can introduce himself.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Zishan Zatar. I work for CompTIA. CompTIA is a non-profit IT trade association. My role at CompTIA is to pretty much do the impossible projects, as I sometimes call it. So it could be helping set up the UK Cybersecurity Council, and something we'll talk about in just a moment. Or it could be, creating wonderful workforce development programs across the country, around the world lately, as it's been. And my background pre-CompTIA was in apprenticeships. Before that, I was in working as a technical professional. If you want to find out more about me, use a bit of open source intelligence and Google me. You'll find lots of interesting places where I come up. So let's move on.
Thank you, Zishan. So what we will cover in this session, the UK Cybersecurity Council journey to date, where we've been and where we are now. Next, we'll look at the career route map. And then finally, we'll look at the cybersecurity qualification framework. So in 2018, the government launched a consultation outlining proposals to develop the cybersecurity profession, and Simon referred to that in his presentation. This included proposals to create a new independent cybersecurity council. We paid very close attention to the feedback from that consultation, which included industry comments on the cybersecurity learning landscape, in particular, that the current cybersecurity qualification and certification landscape was hard to navigate, making it difficult to assess the options available and to make appropriate informed choices about career paths and skills that all organizations require. Another comment was that many existing professional organizations were unable to articulate the equivalences of their qualifications or certifications in the absence of a common technical framework. So these are two areas that we sought to address as part of the formation group.
So as CompTIA was part of the formation group, we were leading on the work stream for qualification careers, and our work stream was tasked with these two key deliverables. Firstly, being creating a career framework that would provide information on career options available in the cybersecurity profession to enable stakeholders to make informed choices. And secondly, a qualification framework to easily navigate the cybersecurity landscape, because you start Googling, qualifications in cybersecurity, and you get such a plethora of information, and someone it literally doesn't have an idea of where to start. So we really want to make it easy for people to literally type into your favorite search engine and say, how do I begin a career in cybersecurity? Up would pop the Cybersecurity Council's website, and they'll be able to navigate to the right resources. So that was the kind of approach we were trying to take. And looking at a bit further, this is when we were trying to figure out, trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the different stakeholders that we had in mind at the moment, the people wanting to enter profession or might be in the profession, of how can I enter the profession or go up further in my career. We felt that it was very important to make it easily accessible through the UK Cybersecurity Council website. Within there, we would have a careers and learning section, and within there will be the careers route map. And following, once you've kind of discovered what different careers are, you could discover the different qualifications within the landscape that we would be able to describe in an easily accessible format. So those were the two products that would actually live within the council ecosystem. And when we were looking at creating these products, we had to come up with some high-level guiding principles. And very important for us was to kind of understand what would the council look like once the project ended. So we want to be quite transparent and create a repeatable process. So you'll see what we'll share with you today, as Simon alluded to earlier, is always going to be in flux as well, because the profession is still evolving. The threat landscape changes. There's new products and services coming out. There's new ways to do things, and of course, the world stage changes. And as you know about recent events, we have to worry about what's going on in the wider world, and that and cybersecurity is a key element of that. So having that transparency and repeatability of the process would mean that long after I'm gone and from the project, as I'm no longer part of the council as a working for them directly, but there were people like Amy and others that would take over the mantle to say, okay, how can we ensure the speciality that we have now can be updated, or how do we introduce new specialties into the council's framework? So it's very important to kind of take that approach to it. The other element was to have clear communications everything we do. So it wasn't enough for me to just say, hey, let's just take all the gobbledygook that you see out there in the industry. We had to make it easily accessible to anyone who would read it. So we were very keen that some secondary school education level English could actually understand and read the content, and therefore be able to make informed choices. In terms of availability, sometimes we do projects that go on and on and on, and the outputs of those get locked and sealed away to not be able to be seen by anyone. Hence why we're very important to us to kind of easily make it accessible for the council website, where they can actually understand all the content, and it brings it together in a one focal place. And finally, it's kind of looking at a consistent lexicon. Again, going back to that gobbledygook, you ask one person in cybersecurity about a certain term, and you ask somebody else in cybersecurity another that same term, and they'll come up with 4 different answers. For example, I was checking my Twitter feed this morning, and someone asking how to describe Active Directory. Some of the answers were very, very interesting, and some conflicted with each other. So we wanted to ensure that we had a consistent lexicon. So the platforms or the products that we were using to bring that consistent lexicon within our products was the CyBOK, the Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge, and the CSEC Skills Framework. So very important for us to kind of use those 2 frameworks and knowledge bodies to kind of bring it all together and make it easily understandable to all. So although CompTIA was leading the work stream, we were certainly not alone. I think we're the most subscribed work stream across all the different elements of the council's formation project. As you can see, we've got other certification bodies, trade associations, industry organizations that create frameworks by themselves, and they were all in differing sizes. So you can see we've got we've got government bodies there. We've got very niche associations such as the WCIT, whereas also some very large organizations such as SANS and what have you. So you can see that. So at one point, I remember looking at a mailing list. We had almost 60 people within that mailing list. So trying to balance all those voices was quite an interesting challenge. But the great thing was, we had that buy-in from across the sector. They were all dedicated to helping us to achieve our goals.
So we're going to talk in detail now about the career route map. And the first thing I want to point out was the actual brief that the DCMS gave us, resulting from the 2018 consultation. And that was to create a framework agreed across the profession, setting out a comprehensive alignment of career paths through the profession, leading towards a nationally recognized career structure adopted by the whole UK cybersecurity sector. So our approach to that was to examine several existing career and skills frameworks in the cybersecurity industry as well as other domains, consult representatives of cybersecurity practicing organizations, training providers, professional bodies, and qualification awarding bodies, as well as draw on well-established resources to ensure that repeatable process which Zishan described. So what has been developed is a framework that provides information on the expectations, skills, and development required for professional specialisms, along with detailed progression through the different roles. And we'll look at that in a minute.
So on the outset, we had to kind of find out what we didn't not know. There was always this idea of having those assumptions, and we all know what happens when you assume things. So we had to go out and do some really good research and kind of drawing on the knowledge and the resources of the different bodies I showed you in the previous slide. You could see there was a lot of information to take in and digest, and then go out and do some research across the world, actually. So along the way to creating the pathways, we found there were some real misconceptions within the industry, in particular with the pathway. As you can see on the image on this wonderful slide here, that the myth was very much a case of you could go from your very low level of your career and work your way up, and it's a nice clear stairway to success. Unfortunately, when we were talking to industry practitioners, we're talking to recruiters, we're talking to a whole lot of different people who we're going to talk about in just a moment as well. There was a case of actually it's not that clear pathway. There is, sometimes you go up, sometimes you go sideways, sometimes you go down. You could go any which way possible. And it was also a case of when people talk about cybersecurity careers, like where do what's the role you want to do? What's the area do you want to specialize in? What is the job title do you have? So there's a lot of conflicting information you have to balance. So it became almost like when we're looking at it and trying to figure out how we would visualize it to make it easily accessible to that stakeholder, which it could be of any type. How could we make that image what's the reality on the right hand side of this screen that you can see, that reality image? It's all higgledy-piggledy. There is no one size that fits all. Every situation is different. So we had to ensure that the process we're trying to go through could address those issues and demystify what was going on in the industry. So we carried out, as I mentioned, quite a bit of consultation with different stakeholders. And what we found from that process, our stakeholder audience grew. And this shows how our stakeholders actually went beyond what we expected for the careers framework. We initially thought it would be that professional or the aspiring professional coming into the industry. Actually, we found it was a lot more than just that. So as well as new entrants, recruiters wanted to use the careers framework to understand what's the difference between a vulnerability assessor and a penetration tester. We had career changes, try to understand, okay, right, which areas should I specialize in? Why should I be going to GRC, or should I go into security ops, as it were? We had qualification bodies and other and trade organizations to understand what gaps there were in the industry and where do professionals need help to kind of bridge that gap of learning and skills. We had cybersecurity managers who trying to understand, the difference between an individual's qualifications as well as the experience and background. So again, what does it's a difference between a risk analyst and a risk manager might be. We had training organizations who actually wanted to figure out, okay, what are the most popular areas of specialties or professions that they could actually train people for. We had regulators wanting to know, is there a particular element where GDPR kicks in or any other policy kicks in where they need to be aware of. We had local authorities. Again, they were looking at deciding, okay, where are the skills gaps that they have could be filled and what kind of roles they should be looking for. And finally, which is quite interesting, teachers, parents, and carers. So the individuals who put that shining light to the very younger generation, say, when they say, I want to become like Mr. Robot, well, do you really want to be Mr. Robot, or is there something else do you want to do? And so that's why giving them some kind of guidance through the council's careers framework would help them to have intelligent conversations. So in terms of the benefits of a career route map, what it includes, We would provide detailed information that would appeal to a wide range of stakeholders across 16 different areas, which we'll just show in a moment. So, and this will not just apply for the new starters, but also the whole list of stakeholders that I mentioned earlier. And we would have that alignment to the industry specialisms in a consistent structure. So as you'll see in a few moments time, we have quite a few specialisms. And as we were carrying out our work, what we found was that the threat intelligence specialism was up and coming. At that point in time, there wasn't much information online about that specialism. So we actually had to go out and speak to people actually doing the job role to help us fill in the gaps, because the worst thing you do is have inconsistent information across the different specialisms. So we want to make sure the same information can be served up in a consistent manner across all of the different 16 specialisms. So it's clear and detailed information is what we wanted to produce. And it would help not just the new hires, but also the seasoned professional, and they could all understand in a very easy format what it all means. What's quite interesting was, in terms of how we ended up to the specialisms, when we're talking to the managers in particular, and we were asking that, like, what exactly do you look for in terms of a cybersecurity professional? And they're very much focused about this idea of being a generalist, but being a specialist at the same time. And we kind of dug deeper, and it turns out they want a T-shaped individual. So they want people who can be who understand that all different areas of cybersecurity at a very generous level. So understand people, process, technology, etc., etc. But then they could actually put the stake in the sand and say, right, this is the thing I'm actually good at. So whether that's security testing, whether that's auditing, whether that is vulnerability analysis, they could actually say, right, yes, I know a bit about all this stuff, but actually I'm really cool at this. And that's what they were trying to actually look for. So that's how we actually ended up with the different 16 specialisms. So what we found very early on, we had a lack of consistency in different job titles in job titles in job postings. So we could call the same job role or specialty different things in different companies, and we would look at these job posts. They're like, hold on, that's the same role, that's the same speciality. We got to actually step back and say, right, what exactly are we trying to do? So we went more on kind of generic terminology as best as we could. And what we're looking for in terms of specialisms was to demonstrate a principal field of professional activity, responsibility of practice. So that's where they would actually put a hat on that stand and say, right, this is what I know as such. So our development process, I love how we broke it down in those stages. It was a lot more strenuous than that, but yeah, that kind of, this shows you what we actually did. In terms of our first stage was to kind of, first of all, drawing upon this wonderful organizations that we had in our work stream, getting the knowledge and information and pushing it all together and mixing it all up and trying to figure out, right, how can we make it easy to understand? And all our early draft work will be then pushed up to the Council Formation Project Advisory Group. And this group was made up of absolutely wonderful professionals, industry, academia, very very people, household names, as it were, if you're in the cyber industry. And they were very good in giving the feedback. Of course, feedback is feedback, so we had to understand how to best balance it and not to hurt anyone's feelings. And from that point, we were able to go back and do some refinements. Once we had good enough products to we went a bit further out in terms of looking at trusted voices. So trusted voices across academia, the industry, both professionals from the industry and corporate organizations, talking to different government bodies and other NGO stakeholders, and drawing upon some professional bodies who may have some interest in cyber, but wasn't cyber the actual main area of practice. So we were actually still talking to those people and saying, okay, yes, we understand this is not really your bag, but give us some feedback. What do you think? And we had some interesting conversation with those organizations. And finally, once we were able to get some great feedback and make adjustments, we went out to the final groups through stage 3 was talking to students. And we're not just talking about students in universities. We actually also talked talk to career changers, so people who are actually in the process of moving from non-cyber job roles, maybe on a help desk, or even non-technical roles. They might, for example, be carpenters, electricians, and they're trying to move into cyber. And we got their feedback and said, okay, right, what helps you to from the product we produced here to move forward. Again, talking to recruiters, and recruiters gave some very colorful feedback of how they found navigating the industry. And from them, we learned many lessons, and we make adjustments. And finally, trainers. And I thought this group was absolutely fantastic. So these are the individuals in different areas. For example, they'll be working for corporate training providers. They'll be working for non-profit training providers. And they would actually give us feedback of when they're teaching the students who are at the core face of actually delivering that content and trying to pull them into the profession or pull them up the profession, and understanding how what they need from the council's products for them to progress. And from there, we were able to produce what we're going to show you in soon.
Thank you, Zishan, for that rundown of the development process. Now we are going to have a look at the route map itself, and we'll show you the navigation to that and then how that works. So once you navigate to the council's website, you then go on the upper right-hand side, click on the menu, and you navigate to the careers and learning section. You'll see there's a huge amount of information. And then scrolling down on the right through the career and learning information, you come to the career route map. So that landing page gives you a little bit of text, and then when you get to the middle of the page, you'll see a visual depiction of the specialisms, the 16 specialisms, which we've been discussing. And there's also a way to demonstrate how they interrelate to each other. But before we move on to that, I just want to show that, at a glance, you can see all on one page those 16 areas of expertise. And I just want to underscore that these are not job roles. They are not job titles. They are areas in the profession that have been identified of having similar skills. Now, if you click on one of the specialisms, you'll see that that specialism has an orange box around it, but other specialisms remain. And that is because we're highlighting there that there are related specialisms that share similar knowledge and skills. So having selected your specialism, you will click on the Learn More, the orange tab, and that will take you into a further breakdown of details of the specialism, in this case, secure operations. So each area will cover a wide range of different information blocks, which you can then click on to look at the knowledge and skills, responsibilities, experience. There are progression levels in each of the specialisms, which will describe two levels of capability following the NCSC's CCP model of practitioner and lead. And the main distinction between those two levels is that the scale and level of capability, or the type of incidents that you would cover in those roles. So for skills, we are using the CSEC skills as a mapping reference, and clicking on that, you'll see personal attributes, specialist skills, and then a relationship with the CSEC skills mapped out. And then when we get to the knowledge, we are looking at the SciBOC as a mapping reference, using that as the lexicon or vocabulary to describe the core knowledge and the core skills. There's also joining information for new entrants. There's information on salaries, and moving on, where you might move to, whether you move laterally or perhaps to a slightly different specialism. So we hope you will look at that at your leisure. And we'll take questions on that after. And now I want to move on to the qualification framework, which is related to the career route map. In the career route map, there is a section for qualifications, And if we clicked on that, you would see that it says coming soon, because we are still in the process of developing that framework. So in this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about what that framework is. Purpose of it is to provide a system of classifying a qualification at different levels for comparability using a consistent lexicon. It's clearly very important that when we're talking about specialisms and we're talking about stepping stones to lead to those specialisms, we provide a wide range of learning products that can be compared using the same measures and methods, and that is what the qualification framework is about. Now, the stakeholders for this are exactly the same stakeholders that we looked at and we spoke to for the career route map, and that includes not just the participants, the new entrants, or people already in the profession, but those stakeholders that have a stake in recruiting and managing people in the profession, or providing products and services for the profession, or regulating the profession, or advising on the profession. So you'll see the same grids there that we looked at in the career route map. Now, again, we had guiding principles for this. It was very important that this framework is open to all cybersecurity qualifications and certifications. It's important to understand that this is not a recommendation or an endorsement. It is simply a mapping process to put everything on a level playing field. Qualification owners provide the information. It's validated by the council, but qualification owners have the final say, that they're happy in the way that their products are described. The council ensures that the information is accurate by having external validators, independent validators. There's a challenge process, so awarding organizations can question, and the council can question and come to an agreement on the qualification or certification. And validity and reliability is checked on an ongoing basis on all qualifications and certifications. So we expect there to be a number of stakeholder benefits. You've seen the stakeholder map is very wide. First and foremost, a clear and consistent approach to identifying knowledge and skills. That was the brief, that is the brief, and that is the requirement. And then to provide some outcomes that can be measured against others, against an agreed range of criteria. There's clarity for individuals for cybersecurity career planning and professional development, as well as transitions between those disciplines. We're providing support for organizations in developing cybersecurity recruitment and selection guidance, and continuing professional development planning. We also hope one of the benefits for this will be for certification developers to look at the market and look at their product range and see if there are any gaps in the market that need to be filled. We're also providing information for trade organizations and government bodies on the cybersecurity qualification and certification landscape to support the industry's promotion and development. And finally, we're offering a scheme here as a reference for such as cyber essentials, where individuals need to present certifications in order to demonstrate eligibility. So a few more than I've got on that list there, but we hope you realize, and certainly as it becomes operational, we hope that the industry will see a great amount of benefits from this particular product. So the approach to mapping is just a little bit of detail of how it's done. It's done at the moment by a form. It's quite a straightforward form where the key features of the qualification or certification are filled in, very similar to the sort of form if the qualification owner was looking to list their products at secondary, they would fill in for the Department of Education. They fill in the details on a single form, and there are separate mapping forms for mapping knowledge against CyBOK, and there's guidance on that. And for the skills mapping, that is currently, as I said, against the CSEC, there's a separate form for that. So the information which is filled in is just a part of it you can see here, but it is the title of the certificate, the type of learning product. We give the owner an opportunity to comment on what they think the specialist area is based on the council specialisms, which was then validated by the council. Learning outcomes are covered, knowledge areas, skills and competency, as I've mentioned, in a framework using the CSEC model levels, which is incorporated into that skills mapping, the knowledge which we've talked about, total learning time, delivery methods, assessment methods, and then there's a link to the product website. So that's a summary of all the information which is captured. And what that is intended to translate into is on the next slide, and this is just an example of the output that we're expecting, just a one-page a display on one page, which shows at a glance knowledge areas, the skills areas, and the salient features of each qualification or certification. Again, to meet that brief of helping people make informed choices about the products which are going to be best for them. So that is that's all I'm going to say about the qualification framework. I'll just say one more thing about. Have we got one more slide about the process, perhaps? Yes, thanks. Sorry. So how this works at the council at the moment, how it's intended to work, is the form is submitted, it's filled in by the awarding organisation. That then goes to some independent validators who will check the form against the technical syllabus or the exam syllabus for the entries which have been recorded, just to make sure that that is that matches. If there's any questions, then we go back to the awarding, or they go back to the awarding organisation. That information is then filled into a database, and that is translated into the one page, something like we've looked at, although that is not the final version. At the same time, it's intended that once that product is validated, it will go to a separate committee, and that will be a career route map committee, which will then look in greater detail at that product and make some judgments about where that product might best fit, or which area or areas in terms of the specialisms as a stepping stone to that specialism and to ultimately standard. So that process is not yet developed, and you'll be hearing more about that later. And then once that process is agreed, that's when that box that you saw on the career route map will be filled in with information on the qualifications and certifications that best suit that specialism. So that's a short review of what we've been doing over the past couple of years, and now we'd be very happy to take your comments and questions, and I'm going to hand over to Lisa to moderate that. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Amy and Zeshan. We'll go into a short Q&A session now on anything that we've heard so far. So I'll just try to focus on the questions that we've had that relate to the presentations that we've had, and then any others we'll do in the Q&A at the end. So one of the first questions we've had is, I've spent nearly £70,000 on a computer forensics degree in 2018. Do these standards now turn my degree into a chocolate teapot?
So I'm delighted to have that question. Thank you very much, Oliver. Absolutely not is the shortest answer I can give you. And I hope that, I think you posted that question before we actually went through the career route map and looked at the qualification framework. If anything, it enhances your learning product, because you're going to be able to see all the different areas where that product will apply to.
Thank you, Amy. Next question we've had in is, looking at the careers route map, I can't seem to find any specialism for operational technology, industrial control system security, which is something I would have expected the Engineering Council or the IET to champion. Was that a conscious decision or an oversight?
No, actually, it's there. It was just one of cases of having so many voices in a room. We had to integrate it within secure systems development. So if you look at the secure systems development specialism, we talk about industrial control systems, OT, that kind of stuff, all within there.
Thank you, Zeshan. Next question is, has the qualifications framework, does it include specific degrees along with other qualifications such as BTECs, T-levels and apprenticeships pathways? And also to Oliver's point, is it considered historical degrees awarded to practicing professionals?
Right, thank you very much for that question, William. So at the moment, the qualification framework is in development as described, and we're starting that development with professional certifications. Once that is embedded, we will then move on and look at regulated products, which is really what you're asking about. So we're not starting with regulated products because they have their own process and format. We're starting with professional qualifications, and then we will move on to that at a later date.
Thank you. Next question is, within what sort of time frame can we expect to see the qualifications framework made available?
Well, we are looking at it as we speak, and we have the second tranche through that is currently being validated, and we should be able to tell you more at the end of the financial year about when we might be able to see that.
Thank you, Amy. Next question. How are you working to ensure that people can afford to break into cyber careers so that we're not preventing groups of people who could be incredibly valuable to teams struggling with a lack of talented people?
Simon, I guess that's a good question for you there.
Happy to. No, I think this is a really good point, James. I think part of the all the work that we're doing and what Amy and Zeshan's basically shared is that what was really important to us, that we don't make this an elitist occupation or career, and that we constantly look at, in relation especially to the pathways, how do we ensure that we don't create any barriers for people joining? So part of all of the assessment, all the work taking place, we also have to look at what are the costs of the courses, courses, the certifications, what are the routes in. Let's also look at what's been mentioned around obviously apprenticeships. Let's look at programs that are completely funded. So I think it's really important that we do. Yes, we look at the key criteria and the technical qualifications, etc. We also look at what's the costs of, so we're not limiting people from joining. And just to share, there is, I think, across the country, and Zeshan and the CompTIA team have a program running in Bradford at the moment. But there's micro programs taking place around the country, which are really training people in different areas of cybersecurity for free. Yeah. So for me, sometimes it's really about amplification, but but there are great organisations who are doing this work, and what we want to do is be aware of that and make sure, as an organisation, a conduit for sharing all of this great work that might be taking place in Newcastle, Bradford, Wales, etc., and actually showcasing that. So for me, it's really important, and also around kind of social mobility. So ensuring that people know the opportunities. So again, that's that collaborative piece: one, being aware, and two, sharing. Hopefully, that's answered your question, James. But fantastic.
Can I jump in? Oh, thank you. Okay. I was hoping you could do a little plug there, Simon. So I'm going to do a bit more plug while I'm here. So yeah, we're doing the Cyber Ready Bradford program, and although it's going to be based in Bradford, the workshops are. We are happy to take people from across the Leeds City region. So that includes Leeds, York, Harrogate, Selby, Huddersfield, Calderdale, all that kind of area, Barnsley as well. So, and the idea of programs such as ours, which are completely free for the individual, is quite simply, we want to increase diversity in the industry. Now, it really irks me when I see 16% females in tech. I've been when I jumped into apprenticeships in 2007, the figure was 16%. 2022, the figure is 16%. For me, the fact that being of an ethnic minority background, seeing was I think 15% in terms of ethnic minority communities in the industry, that's got to change. So we have an issue, and and it's great saying it's a council. What is the council going to do? Actually, folks, we all have to work together in the industry to change it. So it's that case of ask not what the council can do for you, what can you do for the council? Absolutely. So come and join me on this journey, Cyber Ready. Come and join the C3 journey. Be part of the community, and let's change the narrative together.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Zeshan. Next question.
I was going to carry on. We love this question. Just to highlight that the tools, the whole foundation of the tools, the career route map and the qualification framework that the council is developing is about inclusivity, not exclusivity. Absolutely. We're not about setting hurdles. We're about widening the arena by establishing a lexicon and transparent measures that everyone can jump on. Thank you.
Ciara, do you want to come in because everyone's on this one?
So, well, just to add, around the whole diversity bit, the clusters we do play a big role in that as well. Like even in Scotland, we've got women in cyber. Scotland group, Orticon, we work close with Orticon, who I know are also providing. I saw Emma Philport's comment about training to people with neurodiverse conditions. Similarly, Orticon, who I think of offices around the UK, are doing similar. So there are lots of initiatives, but I do totally agree with Seshan that we're still struggling to get those numbers up, aren't we? So we need to almost try and continue to look at this a bit wider to say, why aren't the initiatives we're all plugging and working on not making a difference? There's still something not quite working, is there?
Thank you. Next question that's come in is, how are you planning on reducing monopolies delivering training and education, which minimises competition and therefore drives training prices up, reduces innovation and evolution in what training is being delivered?
It's a separate topic, really. We're not actually looking at training in this group at the moment. Simon might want to speak to this about the future of the council, but certainly in the route map and the qualification framework, this is about the products and the specialisms and not about the delivery. But we are aware that there are issues that do need to be tackled.
Yeah. I mean, just to I think to reiterate that, I think the a lot of the conversations I have, and there's a really good example just now, just talking about £76,000 in chocolate teacup. I think a lot of the issues that I basically hear about is around the cost of courses and what the courses then qualify you to do, and then how much credibility that then has in the marketplace, and sometimes I think the whole view of I've done a specific qualification, was promised this, that, and the other, and I do get a lot of these people who link me on LinkedIn and basically say I've got this masters in cybersecurity and I've got this and that certificate and I still can't get a job. So and that's the kind of reality. So for me, I think part of is really being clear, exactly as Amy and Zeshan basically said, that one, we're really clear about the different qualification certification, what it leads to. I'm always interested in labor market information. So how many specific jobs, if you're looking at penetration testing, security architecture, what's the specific roles that are required in what organization, in what part of the country? And so understanding, right, so if that's the need, then that's what I'll basically go for. And I think that we have to, the more organizations sometimes involved in training, accreditation, certification, then the more competition, which then drives down the competition in relation to the price. If there's a monopoly, that presents an issue. But this is commercial in a sense. I can't dictate what's going to happen on the commercial sense and what organizations decide to do what. But I think the more people sometimes in the market, this is similar to what we got with the supermarkets, it drives down the price. So we want the right quality, but we need it. A UK PLC needs it at the right price to get the people into the sector. That would be my response to that. Great questions as ever, James.
Yeah, I've got one more thing to add to that. I think what we also, whilst on the council website, within the careers and learning section, we couldn't explicitly name platforms, but we also encourage the kind of a nod to things like Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, things that are low cost to zero cost, where individuals who are still trying to come in and not too sure if this is where they want to kind of invest in, go and try out those platforms, see if we can learn for free essentially, and build up the skills. And and what I think might be a good idea for a future council webinar session is talk about that careers and learning and like options available to you. So it's a great question. I think there's more to come on it.
Absolutely.
Lovely, thank you. Next question that's come in is from William Henderson. Is it possible to work with the council and get involved with the career qualifications and careers committees if you are not a member?
I can take that one. Obviously, our priority is obviously for people obviously pay for organisational membership. So our priority is obviously to work and engage obviously with the members as part of that development. I think I think there's two parts of that. One, there's the steering group, which will move into the kind of the committee itself, the kind of working group committee, and then is people who are again still members but not part of the committee. Then there's what we call a community challenge. So what that basically is within the membership, still being we still have the challenge around the standards around the careers and qualifications, etc. But as you see with this roadshow, what we constantly need to do is to have these kind of activities to make sure that the wider community are on board and engage with UKC3, etc. The wider community understands what we're doing and make sure we're going in the right direction. Not everyone's going to agree with it, but it's about that right direction. So I would say if you're not formally a member through the organizational membership at the organization, then it can basically be for that wider roadshow or the wider kind of challenge. Hopefully that answers your question, William.
Thank you, Simon. Next question, Amy, I think this one will be more for you. Would the council be able to make a certification framework similar to the below? It's what I use whenever I need to talk to my staff through their options, and the link to the framework is provided here.
Yeah, so thank you. Both Zishan and I can talk about this. We looked at a massive amount of frameworks that are currently in the market, and they all have benefits, but what the difference is that the council is doing is we are making the process of how that information is arrived at transparent. So people who are using those frameworks know why, and we have the granular detail that people can look at. So I think you're going to find that what we do is going to be hopefully more helpful and certainly much more inclusive. Zishan, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Well, Jamie, actually was one of the first things that I shared on screen back in, I think it was like late 2019 in the meeting room. So someone said, "This is cool," and as you can see from that link you shared, that's gone through quite a journey. And I think if you think back to the earliest version of that roadmap, it didn't look like that. And I think where we are right now, we're in that kind of discovery stage. We have certain bits of how we're going to align the information and serve up. It's a great way to kind of look at it, boom, in your face. But when when you shared the link, I started clicking through it, and it's just going to some dead pages. Whereas what we want to do is actually have all the information on the council website in the same layout and information. So it doesn't matter, if some links to an Excel site goes down, there's some information there. So eventually, fingers crossed, we'll have something. But all I'm going to say is watch this space.
Okay, thank you, Zeshan. Next question that's come in is, to be a chartered accountant, candidates join years-long training schemes and are funded by their firms. Will security professionals have to self-fund their security qualification as part of this framework, or is there a plan to work with organisations to create training funded schemes?
Very, very good question, Zoe. Very good question. I think just to share some of the work we're doing in relation to chartership. So my whole view on it is that we have to ensure that we have what we call equilibrium. So that in relation to whether it's accountancy, whether it's law, whether it's engineering, there's usually a certain standard. It's based on the bylaws of chartership as well. That there's kind of equilibrium in relation to the amount of skills, knowledge, experience, qualifications that you basically need to achieve that. And so that's the process we're working through. So I think that's the first thing. And I think part of then creating that criteria, and it's again at the 3 levels which we basically shared, to charter, principal, and associate. I mean, so definitely a part of our longer term program is around how do employers, and again this is going to be down to employers in a sense of, if employers would see that yes, this is valuable and this is important, and again from my view it is, that they will then obviously put funding into how they kind of secure whether chartership or the appropriate kind of qualifications and experience of their staff. I think at the moment, you see, there's an interesting way where there are people who've been in the sector for 15 years, an awful lot of experience and knowledge, and specific certifications, and they, maybe some of them will maybe be looking at, okay, in relation to chartership. So we're developing the process of how do you then ensure that the people have the appropriate knowledge and skills and competence to deliver on that, and that's at that chartership level. And what does that basically mean? So that's some of the work we're doing at the moment. But from my view, it would be great if employers see the value in not just chartership, but appropriately supporting their staff. And just to say, part of chartership is really important that we've basically got CPD, so continual professional development. This is not charter and run. This is charter and maintain your skills and abilities. Okay, so it's how do I maintain that level of knowledge and experience, and that's definitely a lot of the work that we're going to be doing in the background. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Last question before we move into the presentations on cyber standards is, are there any chances of shadowing and training while on the job, for example, with the council, etc., to build up skills even while not being paid?
Thank you. I can answer that one. Thank you for your question. Obviously we are the standards developer, setting the standards, obviously developing the career route map, obviously doing work on outreach and diversity. So what we don't do on a technical level, just in case, so for Aderonke, so what we do not do is the practical or technical cybersecurity. Yeah, so we're that kind of development organization. So again, I think for people who are interested in, and I do get a lot of emails on this one around people who really want job shadowing, who want to do internships, training, etc. And I think there's definitely some work. And again, any colleagues who have those opportunities, do make contact with the council, because we get an awful lot of people asking, but we're not, in a sense, the providers in a sense. So so do make contact with us as an organization if one, you would like to be on an internship or training or shadowing, but also for companies who have opportunities, please contact us so we could do some of that matching. I hope that answers your question, Aderonke. Thank you for that.
Lovely. Thank you, Simon. We just have one final question that's just come in before we move on to cyber standards. And it's, I'm nearly 40 years old and female. I've recently started in security GDPR, but really interested in cybersecurity threat and intel. However, I cannot afford to take on loans. Would you say it is too late to start a career in this area? I'm from Darlington. Are you aware of any free courses near me? Zeshan, I think this one might be for you.
You know what? The answer is never too late. And I speak from experience from running the Cyber Ready program. And we've had people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s go for that program and have done so well. So in that answer, there's never too late. However, I would say to you, Terry, look at a chat there. We've got people from IC Squared, QA, ASME. They're all offering free courses. Reach out to them. There is always something there. And hey, just put something on LinkedIn, and people are ever so helpful. The cyber community is so friendly. If you say, "Help me, I need advice, guidance, etc." You'll get lots of answers, and then maybe too much information, but you'll get something from that.
Let me just say on this one, Terry, it's absolutely not too late. You're exactly the type of person we need in the sector. Exactly as Zeshan said, there are obviously opportunities out there. LinkedIn's a fantastic place to kind of create those links and really trying to take on board some of those opportunities. But again, if you contact us as an organization, and again, anyone that's got opportunities, definitely around the kind of Darlington area, if you make contact with us, then we will again do some. It sounds like a bit of a matchmaking. The Cybersecurity Council, the matchmaker. So, but that's important. It's part of moving the agenda forward. But fantastic question. I really look forward to joining the sector.
Thank you very much, Simon. So we're going to close the Q&A session for now, but if there are any other questions, we will have another Q&A session after we've heard from Paul Dawson-Hart and Brian Lilly on the work being done on cyber standards. So I'm delighted to welcome them both to give a presentation on the work that's been done in cyber standards to date. Welcome, Paul and Brian.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's just myself actually for the presentation. So good morning to everybody. This is the last presentation in the last leg of the virtual roadshow, and I'm quite glad it is virtual, because on the school run this morning it cost me £1.92 to fill the car up per litre. But thanks for taking time to listen. Again, it's myself, I believe, rather than Brian, but Brian might be here for the Q&A later. To introduce myself, I'm the programme manager here for professional and ethical standards at the council, and I joined around 5, maybe 6 months ago, I think. So we're going to talk about the breadth and depth of knowledge and competence later. Personally, and I'll keep this short, I'd say I've got a fairly narrow and shallow background in cybersecurity. Actually, got a bit relating to Terry's point earlier, only around 4 years, and that's project managing sort of GDPR, Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001, etc. in the membership space. And so in many respects, I kind of represent one of those people that are entering the profession in the mid or at least latter or later stages of their career. So I did take on an awful lot of loans. I thought it was a marvelous idea to do a master's degree in cybersecurity and digital forensics. Not quite clear why. But I won't tell you where, but it's interesting how some of those programs of work at the council relate directly to that informed or uninformed choice. So perhaps it wasn't the best decision for me to take on all those loans. Was that course the right one? Was that university the right one? Not convinced, but I'm halfway through now. So I'm really keen to avoid death by PowerPoint, and I say that with 20 slides of PowerPoint ahead of me, but I'm going to try and reduce that any sort of dizziness with fly-ins or animations or simply putting you asleep. So I've tried to keep this as succinct as possible, and we can hopefully get into the detail later, which questions which we'll of course be delighted to answer. And I'll try and answer from my view of the last 5 months, and Brian can answer in terms of his work as part of the formation team for a year more previous, setting up the council and setting up the standard. So Brian's the technical strategic lead for the council, and as I've just said, he was involved in the formation team working on the creation of the standard for competence and commitment, and he'll provide some great insight there. So slide number 1, the one that you're looking at. So the cornerstone. Well, what do we mean by that? And so today what we'd like to talk about is how we start to underpin and provide foundations to the profession. So how can we provide confidence to those in the profession, those who recruit from the profession, and give confidence to wider society that the UK is a safe place to be online? And so, as the first slide says, putting standards together is really that cornerstone upon which we can have confidence in ourselves and get to a position where security is sort of baked in by design and default, to use a GDPR expression, rather than an afterthought or an added extra. So next slide, actually, no, I've got to do the slides, haven't I? Bear with me a second. So next slide is here. Okay, so back in time and Googling big events of 2016, I came up with Trump and the launch of Alexa, so I've gone with the latter. But it was also the launch of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. We talked about this earlier, but I think it's worth sort of focusing in again on it. And out of that, there were some very interesting statements that are now up on this slide. I'm not going to repeat these or parrot these, you can see them, but what they're trying to illustrate is not that professionals are not up for the job, but that across society there is a lack of understanding of what's needed, and it's really clear that government has a role here and can help drive, support, and define what good cybersecurity looks like, as well as some of the changes in behaviour that's needed. It's also clear that this is a long road, a long journey. Rome wasn't built in a day, and in many other professions, this journey took decades or in fact longer, and certainly many terms of office. So we don't have that luxury, and that's why it's important that we have a council that's all these things: adaptive and responsive and agile, even though I hate that word, and has the support of the profession. But, and it's a big but here, it's not just the government's role. As an independent body and the voice of the profession, we need to ensure the whole sector and profession partner and helps to deliver this rise in cybersecurity standards across the whole UK, and is proud that that standard, the standard we can see in other professions, such as we talked about these earlier, engineering, science, and so on and so forth. Slide 3. Okay, so jumping forward to 2018, and now we're talking about the Tokyo Olympics, and there was a lot of sort of cybersecurity concerns around that. I've drawn out again some key points from the government response to the public consultation. So firstly, and linking into the presentation previous, it's clear there is a lack of clarity around the equivalence of qualifications and certifications in the absence of a common framework. Some really interesting and welcome stats that I've kind of cobbled together, but I think it's still useful, is that 73% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed to the objective for professional standards in regards to the council, and 82% to a code of ethics, which is essentially in a profession where ethical challenges can emerge, and a guiding code is therefore imperative for anyone trying to navigate any conflicts. It's key that this code is refreshed and we continue to withdraw boundaries into the future. There's no hierarchy of specialisms across the sector, and there has to be a common standard across them all, but with varying applications to reflect the nuances of the specialism and the attributes required. Forgive you, my mouse is sticking to the table, so on we go again. So slide 4, National Cyber Strategy. Moving forward again, skipping a pandemic and a potential global conflict and horizon scamming for a plague of locusts, we have the National Cyber Strategy 2022. So here's a consensus stat. It's an interesting one. We talked about GDPR earlier. 82% of respondents say that regulation, namely GDPR, or as it's now cut and pasted and known as GDPR, UK GDPR rather, was an influence in improving cybersecurity. And I'm sure there's a load of opinions around that, but as someone who was a consultant with membership organizations around the regulation, as as well as cyber essentials, but at the same time trying to deliver pragmatic advice around the resource of the ICO and put some realism into the debate about that supposed tsunami of SARS or multi-million-pound fines. I'll probably just be quiet on that one. But I can talk through, as others have, the Royal Charter that's underpinning the council, which is now signed and awaiting seal. So homeworking has somewhat delayed this, but this is an incredibly powerful update and allows the profession to stand tall and sit as equals to other charter professions, and to be proud in that charter status once it's achieved. So the last point is around the exploration of government levers, including legislation to embed professional standards across the profession. This was talked about earlier in the week and many times previous, but it's also how government buys in services, etc. So, for example, again, I'll use the areas I'm aware of, buying cyber essentials, or ensuring that cyber essentials plus is in the mix in order to even be considered for government procurement frameworks. So this is where it starts, and then hopefully that generates sort of waves and ripples that encourage the uptake of the standard in other sectors. Okay, so where are we now? DCMS open consultation 2022. So as a reminder to everyone, or at least as it relates to the professional standards, there is now a desire to achieve a plan which is clear and understood, a plan to effectively empower the council to formalise its role as the standard setter, subject to the consultation, across the whole of the UK, but also a leader across the world. But to do this, we need to ensure the pipeline is rich with a diverse range of people with the right range of skills and competencies. We need to ensure that we're attractive as a profession, and it's fascinating, I suppose, in some regards, to see what's going on there with gamifying of recruitment strategies and advertising in computer games, all that kind of stuff, potentially the future metaverse, if you want to go down that road, and the like. And it's another big but, we need to do this without providing unnecessary boundaries of entry, which Simon touched on before. We need to get a fair price point right for application and registration, not another expensive piece of paper, and ensuring that communities such as the neurodiverse community, just to take one as an example, are considered, particularly when we talk about requirements around communication skills as they relate to that standard. So here we are now. And here are some proposals as they relate to standards. So a commitment to align the government cyber profession with frameworks built and maintained by the council. A discovery exercise around the transfer of relevant, suitable government standards from the government to the UK Cybersecurity Council. Technical standards, such, for example, from the NCSC and CCP. So, and to send a clear signal, and just to repeat the point, a clear signal that there's a desire to formalise the council as the standard setter, to be the place to go to for standards in cybersecurity, via approval of those professional and ethical standards. So we need to be that central voice and to help professionals understand what they can do, and of course the limitations of what they can't. So next slide's interesting one, key challenges. So some of these have been covered in preceding slides, but they're worth repeating and reinforcing in terms of what this is all about. So, well, not what it's all about, but what success will look like, and how do we know when we've realized that success? So immediately something that sticks out for me is a need for the standards to be sustainable, adaptive, and responsive. They're not sort of fixed standards like the standard for a volt or a kilogram or a chemical standard, but like any framework related to GDPR or others, or policy left on a dusty shelf or hidden away in SharePoint, their usefulness sort of weakens over time until they just become irrelevant. And we could talk about sort of faxploiting and the IoT, for example, which springs to mind, relevant to that point. And so the last point, excuse me, and the last point is on inclusivity is key. So we need to introduce professionalism from the outset of practitioners' career. And we need to foster early commitment to, for example, ethical principles, which ties in again to the 3 levels, so chartered, principal, and associate, that were touched on later, and I'll explore further in the slide deck. So the standard. Well, I don't want to read out what you can easily just read yourself, but the key words for me are that we maintain these standards, that we make them relevant by ongoing input from you, and from as wide a range of practitioners as possible across sectors and verticals, etc., from all specialisms and types of organizations. So again, these aren't fixed standards. They need to change. They need to be responsive. But we need your contribution, your help, your support to ensure that this happens. So we've made a good start. The standard has input from a really large range of audiences. And in fact, I know there's a question coming up later about this, so we can expand on that when. But just as an example, we've had input from NCC, Legal & General, Yorkshire Water, other utilities, I believe, MOD, DVLA, Cabinet Office, BCS, IET, I could go on and on and on. But there are lots more. But we're also hopeful that the input will continue because, well, frankly, it has to, because it's essential for us to speak for the profession, all the profession. So it's really important that it's national, that there is a single place to come to for standards, so that it's less confusing and perhaps sort of Romanized, I'm not sure if that's a word, but Romanized, if that's a word, some of those sort of meandering paths that Zeshan mentioned earlier. Okay, so the formation team, of which Brian was a part, and we can talk some more about this later, looked at how they establish a standard. Is cyber really that different from other professions such as health or engineering or architecture? So charter standards exist across a wide range of professions. The formation team looked at existing models, but they were also quite keen not to reinvent the wheel in terms of the good work that had gone before from professional bodies and the entire ecosystem, which is why so many of them, and I've mentioned some earlier, were intrinsic and a key part of components of that project team. So there were robust discussions in the formation team as to how relevant CPD is, coming to the eventual view as an essential component to prove that you're up to date and you can advise on the latest developments and challenges. So those challenges might be, well, now phones, tablets, bring your own device policies, a medicine fridge, or some kind of escape robot Hoover connected up to the internet. But there isn't just a single level. You can either be on a journey progressing through a career, or actually to reflect that role that requires professionalism, but not necessarily in a leadership role, for example. So for new entrants to the sector, introducing professionalism from the very beginning, again, the cornerstone of their careers is essential. And that's why we've got 3 levels rather than a target. So as you can see from the 3 T's, what we need to ensure is that you've got both breadth and depth. And this is, of course, what, let's say, for example, your employer might want, or your clients want, what your team around you needs. So it's a rucksack full of knowledge and experience that we're talking about here. Bit of a boring slide, this one, but I thought it would be useful to kind of get into the detail of what the standard looks like on paper, give you a snippet of what we're talking about. And so this is a page from our standard around competence and commitment. And what we're trying to do is look at what are the attributes we expect to see at each level. What we have on the slide that you can see here is about knowledge and understanding and experience, but we've also got, in addition to that, leadership, communications, ethics, and commitment, which I'll touch on shortly. So the standard again, and some silly little stats top right, but the formation team were very much focused on setting up the council, and that's done, and setting up the generic standard. And the idea is that there'll be post-nominals demonstrating where you sit in the profession, but we're going to need, again, parroting the point, volunteers and input from everybody in order to help advise on terms of further development and development of the standards and indeed the professionalisms. And the last point on this is relates to that, is that these standards, that they don't stand still, they won't stand still, and if they do stand still, they're simply not going to work. So let's get into the next slide, which focuses on competence and commitment. And excuse some of the formatting here, which has gone a bit awry as we've moved into this onto this platform. So we went to ensure that practitioners have commitment. So we'd expect, in other words, we'd expect people to value the profession, understand the status of the profession, and their work within it, both personally and professionally. So commitment to CPD is an example here. So we're looking at the span of the role that someone is undertaking in defining competence, individuals who are a part of the register will be competent in their role within that particular specialism, and whether that's penetration testing or risk management or security architecture, etc., etc., etc. But we've recognised the need for also in terms of the specialisms for a generalist profession as well. But the main focus here is that it needs to be holistic. So we need to take into account leadership, integrity, communications. But again, we need to be mindful of the comment earlier I made about that particular criterion. Next, we get into ethics and a code of ethics. So the council has produced a code, and that code was produced with huge wide input across a number of bodies in the sector and outside. And this is about what it means to be an ethical cybersecurity professional. How do you demonstrate commitment to ethical values in the workplace? And how, as a council, can we ensure there is consistency and fairness in how that code is applied, but that is applied robustly, and that there's real consequence. So the stick. So the council will be the independent and we hope trusted thought leader for ethical values across the sector. We've got a standalone committee for professional ethics, because although it's a sort of a vital thread in the professional registration process, and there is obviously a clear requirement to demonstrate commitment to this in the professional standard, we need to think about how we cast that net wider, not just impacting and influencing registrants or members of the council, because to be frank, that's still quite narrow in terms of the sector as a whole, but across the entire sector. So we're back to that sort of carrot and stick, and that's a real challenge. So part of the work of the ethics stream we set at the council was to produce a number of case studies to look at how practitioners might react and respond to ethical challenges, and what best practice would be for that example. And digital forensics, the module I've just been working on, has many examples here, but also cases where the cost of vulnerabilities to be patched creates sort of tension or pressure from S&Ts, let's say, to ignore, or microbusiness to ignore or delay remedial action. Or another example would be professionals are looking into personal devices under, let's say, dubious instruction from an SMT or from a CEO. So the list of work examples will continue to grow at pace as the ethics committee meets with community challenge around this. Okay, some favorite slides then. So the benefits. Well, let me put that another way, the what's in it for me. So as an employer, it demonstrates an employer's commitment to provide a safer cyber working environment. It demonstrates commitment to high standards, and it could and it should enhance an employer's competitive edge. The benefits for organizations, well, there can be transparency that the consultants, the practitioners they pay for are well qualified, technically competent, with up-to-date cybersecurity expertise and knowledge to meet your business needs. And that those practitioners possess personal integrity and have professional attributes and academic qualifications, and that they're committed to these via demonstratable CPD. Next slide is a wall, I believe, of words, but I'm going to pick some of these out in terms of benefits for practitioners. So this is what they, or you, depending upon the audience, can now demonstrate, as well as what you can gain. So we're talking about things such as confidence and assurance to employers, clients, and the public, credibility with peers, with improved career prospects and employability. Proof that your professional skills have been acquired in a work-based environment with critical awareness, that you're equipped with valuable skills that enhance your CV for career progression. Employability, and of course, the important part, increased earnings potential. That you can demonstrate that you're working to achieve the cybersecurity needs of today and the aspirations of tomorrow. Have a guarantee of the individual's commitment to professional standards, such as the council's code of conduct, practice and ethics that we've talked about, and proves your ongoing commitment to continuous professional development and to ensure your expertise and competence evolves and is up to date and relevant. It also indicates experience and expertise in that particular individual's chosen specialism in cybersecurity to a nationally recognized standard of competence. And so what else? The last one, it demonstrates that you belong, and I think this is really important, that you belong to a network of cybersecurity specialists which is respected and holds prestige. So the next slides, in terms of what's coming up, move here, I probably don't necessarily need to, but so we've got the working group set up. two of which I'm responsible for, which is professional standards and professional ethics. There are 5 on those working groups to start off with. That's going to rise to 10 as they migrate to formal committees in or around May or June, and then 15 at the tail end of this year with a term of 2 years. So the main focus for me was that we get some real good sort of diversity of thought into that group, and I'm glad to say that I think we do. We've got regulators, we've got representatives from academia, we've got professional bodies on the group, and we've got UK-wide representation with a lead from Cyber Northern Ireland. But as we rise to 10, we'd like to increase, that input and influence and leadership, and increase that diversity of thought even further. And so that's key to that group. I mean, just to think about SMEs and micro businesses, which I think make up, I've probably got the stat wrong, but 73 or 75% of the profession, it's key that someone's there that represents that significant section of the sector. So the council has a digital HQ. So right now I'm in Nailsworth, Gloucestershire, for example. And governance figures in Wales, England, Northern Ireland, for example. So we're not London centric, and we want to, be as inclusive as possible in terms of attracting input from across England and the UK. So we're looking forward as part of the next phase of the council, and we want more input, we want more collaboration from as wide and as big a tent as possible. The Royal Charter, I'm not necessarily sure I'm adding anything that hasn't been mentioned before, but it's here, it's signed on vellum. I'm not quite sure what vellum is, but slightly delayed, as I mentioned earlier. And we have electric signature or a signature that's happened there. But this is going to become a real and tangible thing very, very quickly. And I think that will be over to questions and answers from the panel, which I look forward to.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Paul, and welcome, Brian. Please do put your questions for Paul and Brian into the chat, and I'll just give it a minute for any to come in. So there might just be a lag for a few seconds while I wait for any questions to come through. Okay, I haven't seen any questions come in as yet from our audience. So Brian and Paul, I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you just want to add while I wait for anything to come through.
Well, I mean, for me at least, Lisa, it's how, if you want to be engaged with the work of the council, if you want to be engaged and influenced in terms of the work of the working groups, become a member. There are routes to do that on the website. Join our mailing list. If that's not a step you're not prepared to take quite yet, join our events. For me, it's important to have as big a tent as possible, but at the same time, if there are those organizations that aren't quite sure yet, I think it's worthwhile, although they might not be in the tent, certainly talking to them just outside the tent door, if that makes sense. So I'm aware that there is some conflicting views, but we welcome all of them, and they are all important.
Okay, and I think from my point of view as a practicing professional, I find all of this really exciting, and I'm very enthusiastic about it, because it's a chance for us as a profession to be on a par with others that we work in day in, day out. So I work with engineers all the time, I work with human resources, I work with accountants, and they all have a route to chartership, and I think it's brilliant that we've been given that route as well.
Thank you, Brian. Please do put your questions across for Paul, Brian, and Simon. And there is a question that's come in. When will the standards be published?
you want to take a first stab at that, Brian?
Okay, so I think the answer is in the near term. We are at the minute working through how we're going to turn what the project did into something that's reliable and reliant and achievable and realistic. Because what we want to do is effectively be able to run this through and get people to be chartered as quickly as possible. So what we're trying to do now is learn from others practical implications of where this looks like. So we've been talking to the organizations that have, I guess, applied standards into the ecosystem, and we're looking how we can the lessons learned from that and how we can actually accelerate forwards. And so I think the best answer I can give at the minute is watch this space, but announcements should be certainly within the next 4 to 6 weeks, I would say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're talking about, low months, high weeks, low months. But the important point for me is joining for 4 or 5 months ago is that the formation team have put a huge amount of work into developing the standard, and we've got a great base point to work from. I just think now we're just looking at some tweaking and some refinement and getting in a bit more input into the process, just to make sure. We talked about it being responsive. We need to be talking about responsive month to month to month. So therefore, from June of last year to now, that's a year. Things have changed. Let's continually review this and continually improve it.
Lovely, thank you, Paul. Next question that's come in is, how will this affect your ability to practice? Will this be a required standard?
I'll take that one as well. So I think the council, we are operating on the basis of, under the Royal Charter, that we're producing chartership for everyone, whether it eventually becomes a required standard or not. I think it's important that as professionals we have some recognition that we have a title that meets what we've achieved in our careers. Now, we're also aware that government has launched, and actually it closes, I think, in 2 days' time, consultations on this very subject. So I think, like everyone else, we will be party to the results of that consultation, and then we'll work through whatever the results are and the effect that it has on the council and on our standards.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Just to reiterate, I think the point that Brian's basically raised, I think obviously the consultation is out on live at the moment, closing Sunday 11:45. I think the results of that should be published, I think, by June. So I think for us as a council, again, I think it's a term that's been used. It's the importance for us to be agile, but whatever the outputs from that is an input for the organisation, whichever way it goes. So I think it's really for us, it is about being agile, it is about being flexible, and it is about being responsive. Does anyone know what direction it's going in? No. So for us, it's about being responsive based upon the actual outputs.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Next question that's come in is, will you be running a trial stage?
Okay, but I think the short answer to that is yes. I think that's our current thinking. The long answer is we haven't quite worked, and that this is part of where we are in this process, is trying to learn from other trial stages that have been run in other areas to make sure that we get something that's effective as possible, so that we can get this whole thing up and running and into the profession as smoothly and quickly as possible.
I think it relates to one of the points I made around sort of Rome not being built in a day. I think we need to learn the lessons of other sectors. That's why the working group, the committees, will be feeding into this trial, and we'll be learning from their experiences and the experiences of organisations that have been doing this for a lot longer. It's not realistic to expect that the council can suddenly just do this from scratch. We need to have a trial and do this in a sensible, focused and careful way.
Absolutely. And just to again reiterate the point, I think the Sorry about all of the analogies. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's my first one. Also, we don't want to, in a sense, reinvent the wheel. I think there is a lot of experience and a lot of organisations. So we've been having the conversations, and we will continue to make sure that we learn the lessons from those organisations to inform our developments. I think that's absolutely essential.
Lovely, thank you, Simon. Please do keep your questions coming in. And another one that's just come in is, who was consulted during the process, and can you get involved to support it under the assumption that it's still ongoing?
I think, William, to answer that, I mean, I mentioned a whole series of organisations that were involved in, in the process of the standard, from MOD, DVLA, utility companies, and then chartered bodies, etc. So a huge wide range of organisations were involved. Your assumption is entirely correct. That's still, that process is still ongoing, and that's why we welcome new members to the council, in order to feeding those new ideas into the working groups and into the committees. Or even if you're not prepared to make that step just yet, again, as I mentioned earlier, to join events, to join our mailing list, to look at what we're doing. Again, it's important for me to have as wide a tent as possible, but at the same time, we can be at the front door talking to people that are just sort of stood outside of it, umming and ahhing. That's important. And for those that have got, perhaps some more pessimistic views, that those views are important too. We need to consider those and engage with those individuals and those organisations. And so membership shouldn't necessarily be a sort of a prohibitory factor in that. We need to talk to everybody.
Okay, and I think, just to add to what Paul says, I think when we did it in the setup project, which I was involved in, there was actually a multi-led process. So we started off with quite close to the people that were in a small working group, and developed, I guess, a proposal. The next thing we did was we took that out to the wider audience that were close to those involved, did a peer review on it, got actions, put it all back together. And then we put it out to a wide, I guess, public consultation across the industry, which is where a number of the organisations that Paul mentioned got involved, got feedback, got thoughts, again, changed it and moved it forward. And we expect that process, or a similar process, to be repeated as we move through any trial. Because what we want to do with this, we know that we will never get to perfection, but we want to, at every iteration of this, we want to improve and make it workable and viable for the profession.
I suppose one other thing very quickly there is, I've just just thinking out aloud about that. I've just been mentioning lots of big names as if those are the focus, the MOD and the et cetera. As I pointed out, 73% of the sector is SMEs and micro businesses. We need to engage that level strongly as well, and have input from those organisations.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Just checking to see if there's any more questions that are going to come in. Please do send them through for our speakers today. And again, I'll just give a few seconds in case of any lag to allow any final questions to come in. Now, I think that's oh no, I think we might just have one more that's come. Yeah, one more. So, when assessing the integrity of legal, moral and ethics for members, do you have expectations of being an arbitrator of complaints in this area, e.g. losing their chartered status?
I'm fully aware that this is I'm fully aware that this is a discussion that's ongoing, and was ongoing certainly as part of the formation team. I don't think I've got any kind of iron answers to come out of that, unless Brian would like to add anything at the moment.
I think
there's an ongoing discussion.
Through the formation project, we looked at a number of different professions, and different professions have got different ways of handling this. They're either handling it at the professional body level or at the council level. Now, what we did in the setup project is we definitely looked at the council level, it's setting ethical standards, but I guess what we'll work through as part of establishing the standard is taking feedback on exactly this. Where is it, who is best placed and how is it best run to actually, I guess, hold and suspend chartered status from effectively individual members.
I completely agree with that. And I know there's a lot of work that are carried out as part of the kind of ethics, obviously working group, and I'm sure we'll continue. But I think that is part of the current conversations. I know I have conversations around, in a sense, what our role within that would be, or is it more sitting with the organisation itself, like the employer. So I think that's an ongoing conversation piece.
Yeah, I don't like the term carrot and stick, although I've used it twice in my presentation. But wherever it sits in the end, there needs to be some kind of stick that to put it bluntly, in terms of actual repercussions and actions that happen out of ethical mishaps, let's say.
Thank you, Paul. Please do get any final questions in before we wrap up. Again, I'll just give it a few seconds for any lag for any final questions that come through.
I think while we're waiting for that, Lisa, I think it's just to say, excellent round of questions. I think both for obviously Amy and Zeshan and Kiara, etc. I think the quality of the questions, I love the one about obviously the teapot. I think it's really been important because all of these will be captured for us as an organisation, because in a sense we need to then, and again I think it's something that Paul said, any kind of when I say issues or complaints or discourse or disagreements, that's an important part of a development, because sometimes somebody will be representing a view of many, but many don't say. So we don't see that as negative. We just see it as, that's an important point that's been raised. So, and we need to mitigate that. So again, if anyone's got any questions they want to put into the chat, we're more than happy to kind of take that. But I think that also just to say a massive thank you to everyone who's participated today. And I know Lisa's going to do the wind up, but I think it's been great questions today. Great questions. So well done.
Absolutely, Simon. Thank you all so much for attending today and engaging and sending your questions through. And also huge thanks to Simon, Kiara, Amy, Zeshan, Paul and Brian. Before we just close, I just want to take the opportunity to mention the consultation that is currently taking place, and particularly the one on embedding standards and pathways in the industry. That actually closes on the 20th of March, so that's this Sunday. And it's really, really important that we get as many voices heard through that consultation to shape our work moving forward. So please do respond to that, and hopefully how you can do that will be shared in the chat function for you as well. And also we will be launching a series of events in April onwards. So please do keep an eye on the UK Cybersecurity Council's website for those. It's been a pleasure to talk to you all today. Thank you all so much for attending, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.